Hello, great ones. Welcome to the Live and Be Great podcast. I'm your host, Latanya Sampson McDonald. I am a life coach and a registered marriage and family therapist associate. And this podcast was created to motivate, educate, and inspire all to live and be great. On today's episode 38, I want to talk about the importance of the relationships that you have and the role that they play when it comes to your trauma and your healing. The relationships that I am talking about, it can be any relationship that basically affects your perception of the world, how you view yourself, how you view others. We are an experiential, I would say, being, right? So certain influences play a role on your psyche, right? That's just the way of life. We all have to deal with it. So it can be a breakup. It could be a loss of a friend. It could be a death. It could be, your parents. That's where the majority of it starts. But, if you had emotionally in tune parents, um, things may have turned out better for you, but I don't think there's a such thing as a perfect parent, right? So in the end, it's about accountability, right? When it comes to parents and the big major role they play when it comes to how you view yourself, your trauma, and in your healing process, right? So wonderful experience that I had recently. um, and I have been wanting this for so long. Well, I wanted it for so long. But my mom, I had set up a boundary with her. And part of that boundary had to do with her not being accountable for certain things that happened in our relationship. And based on how she viewed things, which I'm sure a lot of people who have, I would say, an attachment issue, may have low self-esteem, may not have had a father or a mother or, just emotionally available parents. You kind of are throwing stuff at the wall to see what works a lot of the times when you become a parent. So oftentimes you hear parents say, "Oh, I sacrificed so much. Like, why do you care about if I did this to you or did that to you? What about the good things? Or why do you only remember the bad things?" And I'm going to make this clear, right? Like I had to tell my mom, and, the clients that I work with that are in therapy with their parents or whatever the case may be. It's not about remembering the bad things. It's about the fact that your position that you play, the role that you play in your child's life, right? It hurts more than if a stranger would do the other things, right? So you have this back and forth. Yes, this person provides for you and puts food on the table. Some parents don't even do that, right? Some are just like, you need to be grateful that I birthed you, and that's a whole that's a whole nother rabbit hole that I could go down, but I ain't gonna do that today. But anyways, I probably have before if you listen to my previous podcast. But based on the ego, right? And if it's not as, I would say, efficient as it should be, if it's not in check or intact, you may take your child saying, okay, what you did hurt me, as, oh, you're ungrateful, right? Or you may take your child saying, you hurt me, as, well, I'm a bad parent. I know I'm not a bad parent, or I'm a bad person, right? So you gotta, when somebody that loves you says that you hurt me, and this still affects me, it's not about, okay, well, you're grown now, or that happened so many years ago. No, like, the stuff that the people that are so important to you do to you affects you for the rest of your life. And what you do is you go through the process to learn how to cope, right? But if you are on the other side where you're tired of this person or that person saying that you hurt them, I mean, there's nothing wrong with apologizing, whether it was your intention or not. And if you are not doing the work on yourself and you don't have someone to kind of point out how this happened, via a therapist or a counselor or whoever, then you may not be as receptive to understanding that this person that you love, or feel like they love you, or whatever the case may be, the attachment that you have to this special person, why they're hurt by what you did. Okay? And oftentimes with teenagers, I would have to explain to them, and adults, I'm not even gonna lie, but teenagers, when they do come in, it's not that your pain isn't valid. Unfortunately, your parent can't hear your pain over their own, right? Their wounded child is who raised you, basically, and who is interacting with you and is ignoring how you feel, right? And it could be very, very hurtful, and it can affect people for a very long time. And I think I talked about on one episode that oftentimes when you do have that doubt and you're down on yourself, you don't really hear your voice. You do hear the person that told you that you loved, right? Ask yourself, if while you're listening, when you are having that doubt, when your self-esteem is low, when you don't have the confidence in yourself when it comes to certain things, whose voice do you hear telling you that you can't do it, right? Or whose voice do you hear telling you that you can? But we all know that you'll find out. If the person doesn't believe that, then it's like no use. It's going to fall on deaf ears if the individual, right? And that's where the person that was hurt has to be accountable, as to what they allowed to affect them, but go through the process to heal from it so that it wouldn't. But anyways, back to my story. My mom did have the habit of, when any of us had grievances with her, of she'll apologize in the moment, but then like next day it'll be like, but you did this, right? So it kind of cracked the open back, it kind of cracked the wound back open again. And it's like, there's a release when you get an apology for somebody hurting you. You see what I'm saying? Depending on where you're at in your healing journey, and how much that person means to you, right? There's a big release. So it was kind of like a yo-yo, boomerang. I don't even know what metaphor I could use, but it was kind of like, okay, you break your arm and you put the cast on, right? That apology is the cast. Okay, arm still broken, right? But the cast helps it heal. So the cast is the apology. And the person comes back and is like, your arm ain't really broken. I'm gonna just take this, I'm gonna just snatch this cast off, right? The very next day. Or even some of us darn hours or while you arguing or whatnot. um, so it's like it's back broken again, right? It didn't get a chance to heal or heal right, It's not the same again. It may be a tad bit different, right? But it's still broken, you know? And yeah, some would say, well, let somebody else put the cast on, or somebody would say, well, you put the cast on yourself. Yes, those are options, okay? But when I'm talking to the people who still have a chance to rectify and repair their relationships, do the work you need to do on yourself so that you can hear that person that you hurt, right? So like I said, my mom had the habit of doing that because her ego, right? She's a Leo. That's their thing. Okay. They take what they do and how they look to people on their reputation very, 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 very seriously. Okay. So if you have a Leo as a publicist, you're probably always gonna win. But anyways, they have big hearts, right? And it's just they in their own mind, especially based off of their trauma, like based off of my mom's trauma, she would definitely go back into little girl phase and feel like she had to prove herself, right? As far as I'm not a bad person and this is why I did this bad thing that hurt you, even though I know it hurt you, right? And then also when you lack accountability, when you never, got apologies or anything, or when you haven't even acknowledged certain things hurt you when it came to your parents, and done the work, you can find yourself just being numb and repeating the same stuff that the person that you love said hurt, just repeating it over and over and over again and being like, well, I don't care. Right? And that's definitely the vibe that a lot of parents are in based off of the cycles, right? They forget, or they're taught to forget how things felt, sometimes right in the moment. I've said before, if you are a child and you don't pay bills or whatever the case may be, you have nothing to stress about. You don't have no real feelings, right? Or that let me give you something to cry about type of situation, that vibe. There's a lot of, old school parenting styles that really, really set people up for failure in the long run. And when you don't recognize how it affects you, that part, you can end up, repeating the same cycle, even though you never intended to, right? And, my mom finally get into the space where I could better articulate it to her when she was open. When I set a boundary that she had to pay attention to, a particular boundary that she was missing, that I was like, nope, you still haven't apologized for, such and such. First thing she said, because I don't feel like I did anything wrong. That's the first thing she said. Right? So I had to really take a step back and go ahead and address it. And I don't know, maybe I said it differently this time. Maybe she was in a space where she can receive it. But like I said, that boundary, you know, really, that particular boundary made her pay attention to the effect that it had on me and the effect that it had on her, right? Of having that boundary place and not being able to just do whatever you wanted to with your daughter and for your daughter, based off of what happened and it not being repaired and rectified. And, her admitting her headspace. And I already knew that's the difficult part with me. Somebody who is an empath already and been doing this therapy thing since they was a little girl. I already knew, like, my mom was broken. I already knew the trauma she experienced in her childhood, right? But that doesn't excuse the behavior. It never will. Okay, that's something else that people do need to understand when we talk about mental illness, depression, and trauma. That don't excuse your behavior. It explains it, right? It helps people empathize with you and understand, but the people you hurt are still going to be hurt. And when you do that, there are consequences, right? So in order to repair the relationship, you got to rectify that. You got to acknowledge it, and the first thing you do need to do is acknowledge it in you. When did you feel this way? What happened to you? And a lot of the stuff that happened to me in my mom's relationship and with my family, a lot of the things that happened, it was a cycle. It already happened before. So it was happening again, and because it wasn't rectified or healed or acknowledged before, it's like I had to go through it again, right? And that's why I take, having children seriously and generational curses and healing seriously, right? And facing yourself seriously is because if I didn't do the work on myself, I would have been headed down the same path, right? I was already headed down the path with my nieces and nephews, as I told you all in the other podcast. I believe it's the Corporal Punishment podcast. I was a hurt little girl. Couldn't do it, was taught not to do whatever back to the person who did it to me because they're older. And that resentment needed some place to go, right? Where, and for those who like to say, oh, I was hit as a child or this happened to me as a child and I turned out fine. No, you didn't. Because if you did, you wouldn't be repeating the same behavior, right? When you really have done the work on yourself. And you see how it affects you, because it does. I can always point out, no one, okay, has been able to tell me that they turned out fine and they've experienced trauma. No one. They could lie all they want, but it's not true. But man, receiving that apology and me explaining to her, because she did end up apologizing, but she apologized the right way, okay? If this is a lesson, the proper way to apologize and rectify. There is no but, okay? There is no but. As soon as you say but, it's gone, and you got to start over, okay? There was no but this time. And I explained to her again, like, that I needed her to take her ego out of it and to understand that I'm not saying she's a bad person because of this. I'm saying this hurt. Okay? And this hurt. And if you want this boundary lifted, you're going to have to acknowledge that. Right? Validate that and apologize. And then we can start, And then the apology was just wonderful. Like, she even said, I'm not taking back the apology. I'm not making excuses for what I did. I hurt you, and I'm sorry. And my heart just was like, wait, am I dreaming right now? Because I thought I would never, ever get that, because it's been however many years that certain things, have affected me, and I brought it up, and there was always a comeback and an explanation, right, as to why you did do it. No, 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 I don't know. When it's time to you work on the explanation. You acknowledge the explanation for yourself. I don't need to hear that, and the person that you apologizing to don't need to hear that, right? Especially when there's a but and you deserve, because that's what that but does. It makes the person feel like they deserved it, and they didn't, right? Unless that's really how you trying to go with the conversation, understand that's not a real apology. Okay, so be aware that that's not a real apology, and you know it. Okay, so if that is your intention, because sometimes that is people's intention, right? Like, for instance, if somebody is play fighting with you and you like, I don't want to play fight, please stop, and they continue and you lay them out, that's where you can say, I'm sorry, but, or I'm not sorry, because you're not really sorry, because it's a lie. You had to defend yourself, right? So just don't do it. If you're gonna put but in there, just don't do it. Tell the truth. You wouldn't stop play fighting with me, and I told you to stop. So you got laid out. This is your consequence. That's it, right? That's what it is. You wouldn't stop cheating on me. So we getting a divorce, right? You wouldn't stop not coming to class and doing the work, so you got an F, right? Consequences for your actions. Okay? Ain't no sorry. But I don't know, y'all. That was I've wanted that for so long, and we talked about more. Talked about more. I don't know if I'll save that for another podcast, about the effects of her really acknowledging being a little black, me being a little black, dark-skinned girl who was the youngest, had 3 brothers, only girl, but just dad in the house, but still never really felt protected. Physically, not even physically. Not even physically. On the outside looking in, yes, but not really. I was never the princess. And to have my mom acknowledge that and apologize and say that she's not going to take away the apology, that was amazing. And I want that for more people. I really, really do. I've had it happen. It is possible. I've had it happen for my clients before I even got it for myself, But that's my heart. Like, even if I couldn't get something or I couldn't reach a certain height where I'm at, that doesn't mean I ain't gonna fight to make sure you get it, right? And when I do see it and when I'm able to witness this, I'm honored. And I don't know, like, and the crazy part about it, even though I was able to see it happen in my sessions, I think I just kind of gave up a little bit. I still wanted it, but I kind of gave up on trying to push for it a little bit, right? But when I switched to wanting it, and the moment I switched to wanting it was when I decided to go ahead. Well, I talked about it with my therapist, but I decided to go ahead and tell her, like, this hurt, and if you want this fixed, this needs to happen, right? That was the moment I decided, okay, give you another chance. Also, when somebody apologizes, this is something that I also had to work on. It's something I perfectly explain to my clients, but when it came to me, I don't know, it just sort of left me, I guess. But you do have to give people grace to change, right? Because they not inside your body, they not inside your head, and sometimes, based off of your trauma and other factors, you don't really know how to articulate how you feel to people like me. My emotions. Y'all might think I have a way with words, which I do. But essentially, when I'm teaching you all like about healing and giving you a certain perspective, it's because I'm oftentimes taking myself out of the equation and observing what I went through, right? Because it's easy for me to speak up for someone else. So a lot of times I have to take myself out of it to be able to better articulate, you know? I don't know why that is. Still trying to figure that out. Maybe that's because I didn't feel like I had a voice. Maybe because I was used to get made fun of all the time because of how I talked, because of everything, really. That trauma, right? That trauma really played a role in how I viewed myself and how everyone does. Okay. And bonus, I was waiting for, you know, her to come back and take it. She was real close. She was real close. She was real close, right? She said something, and I was like, I'm going to just ignore it, and we're going to push through, right? Because remember, God give people grace to change. Don't expect immediate, like, change or whatever. But I want to say about the third day of her calling me, she apologized again. Like, what? This ain't never happened. Okay? I don't even think this ever happened to any of my siblings before. It's always followed by, but you did this and that, and because this and this. It's always because of what somebody else did. It's never because of how she did. And I think I mentioned this in a previous episode, but if there is an explanation to be given, the best one is to turn it back on self, right? I can't remember if I talked about me apologizing to one of my friends, but quickly, but when I apologized to her as to how I treated her in the past and how it affected her moving forward, it was, you're right. I apologize. Um, and the explanation was back on me. I was projecting onto you what was happening to me in my household, right? And it felt good to do that. It felt good to not do the but you were, and that's your fault, cause I'm sorry, but it felt so good not to have to do that, right? So if you are going to explain it, a lot of our parents didn't even know how to love themselves, right? Let alone love you. A lot of our, past relationships, friendships, influential people in our lives, siblings, whoever, right? Family, whoever. A lot of it is projection on how they feel about themselves, right? Bullies too. Like a lot of it is projection. So if you're going to explain that, right? Don't make it that person's fault that you hurt them. Okay? Unless they hurt you, right? Remember we talked about that. You was play fighting thing. Now that's different, right? There's a consequence to that. But when you acknowledge it, right? And you take accountability. That's the best thing you could do. And I know people be afraid because they're afraid of, looking weak or looking bad. Don't do that. They pride get in the way. Don't worry about that. If I can get a Leo, okay, a strong Leo mama, Guyanese mama, okay? If I can get her to apologize, it's possible for you to apologize, okay? If I can apologize, I mean, it's me. I apologize for a lot of things, anyways, but I guess that doesn't count. Um, but I don't know. It just warmed my heart, and I want to hope for the best. That's just what I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna cut it off. I'm going to see where this goes. I want us to build. I want us to move forward, still with, certain boundaries for both of us, right? But I'm not letting go of this space of joy and healing. Okay? So, the question is, what if you can't resolve with the person, right? Either you need to apologize for something, or you would like somebody to apologize for something and say they passed away, or they just are like, no, never, right? Then you gotta go full force into healing you, right? Acknowledging your pain first, but doing the work to heal. And please just go to a therapist. Everybody needs therapy. I ain't gonna stop saying that. Everybody does. I'm keeping a therapist as long as I can. Okay? If I could keep a therapist till my last breath, I will. Why not? Support. Come on now. Support that is just for you, with no interruptions, no biases, no judgment. Right? Get a therapist or get a life coach. Okay? Get a life coach. Have someone. So, that's kind of what we do anyways, right? We are technically reparenting you. We're repairing those parts of you that have you in a life that is unhappy, unfulfilling, and, wreaking havoc, right? We help with that. Okay? And a lot of times when you can't articulate it for yourself, that's what we do. Okay? We unravel those tangles in your head, in your psyche, in your heart, right? To help you get to where you want to be, to live that life of happiness. We all can get there. Don't believe that you can't. It's possible. Okay? And, for those who need to apologize, parents, exes, whoever, who have gotten to the place where they want to move forward and have closure. And, like I said, some of y'all is like, I just want to stop hearing about what I did wrong. If you want to do it, if you want that to happen, number one, acknowledge it in yourself first. Okay. Number two, check your ego. And number three, apologize and change your behavior. Best apology is change behavior. Okay? Just do it. 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 You don't know how many, when you are accountable, you don't know how many generations of your bloodline you're healing. When you're accountable for your own healing, and you can apologize to your children, you helping heal the world, really. So don't nobody else have to deal with that hurt person hurting other people, because that's all it is. No one is just born to just come and wreak havoc. I mean, unless they're a demon, and that's a whole different conversation. But you had to be inhabitable in order for them to be a demon, for those of you guys who believe in that. Okay, because I do. But you had to be inhabitable. Okay? In order for that to come in. So, I feel good. I do. I really do. And I'm grateful that I was able to get this experience. I'm always grateful that I'm able to get to that point with my clients. It's possible. Okay? It's possible. And like I said, if that person is just like unwilling, or if that person has passed on, or whatever the case may be, you can still heal if you acknowledge your own pain. And you get that validation, you get that support that you deserve, from therapy or a life coach. Okay? So, I hope this has been informal, educational. I hope you can feel the love through the speakers or your headphones. That's what I'm here for. And I'm happy when I'm able to do that. Living in my purpose. And my hope is that whatever you desire when it comes to the relationships that mean the most to you, you get it. Right? Just remember to start with you. All right. Thank you all for listening. Give yourself permission to live and be great. The Live and Be Great podcast will be airing every other Friday. If you have truly enjoyed this podcast, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for giving Live and Be Great a chance. Please feel free to share, like, give a review, subscribe on whichever platform that you're listening to right now, on iTunes or Apple Podcast, Spotify, Anchor, as well as Google Play. The Live and Be Great podcast is strictly crowdfunded, so if you are interested in becoming a supporter, you can click the link in the description, or you can go to liveandbegreat.com and scroll to the bottom and donate to the Live and Be Great podcast today, so I can continue to give you good and motivational content. Thank you all for listening, and don't forget to give yourself permission to live and be great.